I never thought my dignity would be shredded in front of 200 guests on the happiest day of my daughter's life. Yet there I was, standing in the grand ballroom of the Dallas Country Club, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, as the sound of fabric ripping echoed like a gunshot across the room. I remember holding my champagne glass, smiling proudly as Emily, my only daughter, my baby, was about to walk toward the wedding cake with her new husband. The chandeliers sparkled, the music softened, the cameras turned. It was supposed to be the perfect moment every mother dreams of. And then, it happened. Linda, my husband's cousin, who had been lurking around me all evening with that fake smile plastered on her face, stumbled toward me. At least that's what she wanted everyone to think. Her hand shot out, grabbing the side of my navy blue gown, custom-made floor-length, embroidered with delicate silver threads. And with one swift tug, the fabric tore open from my waist down to my thigh. The sound was sickening. Gasps filled the room. My skin flushed hot, then cold. I felt every pair of eyes on me, guests, relatives, business partners of my son's, even the photographer who froze mid-shot. I stood there humiliated, exposed in more ways than one. My dress hung in tatters, but it was her words, whispered into my ear as she yanked, that cut even deeper. "You don't deserve this happiness," she hissed, her breath hot against my cheek. I couldn't move. My throat tightened. My daughter's big day was collapsing in front of me, and I was powerless to stop it. The crowd didn't know what to do. Some people giggled nervously, others looked away, pretending not to see. And then there were those who stared with pity. Pity I didn't want, pity that felt like salt in an open wound. Linda straightened up, pretending to fuss with her heel as if she had simply tripped. She even had the audacity to murmur, "Oh dear, such an accident," loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. Her act was flawless, but I knew the truth. And the worst part? She wanted me to stay silent, to swallow my shame so she could walk away unscathed. But what she didn't expect was that my sons were watching. Daniel, Robert, and James, my 3 boys who had grown into powerful men, locked eyes across the room. They saw their mother humiliated. They saw Linda's smirk. And in that moment, I knew something shifted. They weren't going to let this go. I forced a smile, trying to mask the tremble in my hands. I would not ruin Emily's wedding with a public outburst. I swallowed my pride, even as my heart bled. But inside, a storm was building. Because what Linda didn't know yet was that tearing my dress would be the last mistake she ever made. And what happened next, when my son stepped in, would change everything. Before that night shattered my dignity, there had been years, decades really, of building a life filled with love, hard work, and the quiet kind of pride only a mother knows. I wasn't born into wealth. My late husband Thomas and I started with nothing more than a rented apartment in downtown Dallas and the dream of a better future for our kids. I can still see us, 2 young dreamers in our 20s, standing inside our tiny bakery. It was 12 feet wide, the oven always overheated the room, and flour dust clung to my hair no matter how often I washed it. But we laughed through the exhaustion. Every loaf of bread, every cupcake we sold meant diapers for the boys, or gas in the car, or rent for that month. And oh, the boys. My 3 sons. Daniel, the eldest, was always serious, always watching his father's hands knead dough as though business secrets were hidden inside. Robert, my middle child, had that spark in his eyes, charming every customer with his little jokes, even when he was barely tall enough to peek over the counter. And James, my youngest, clung to my apron strings, stubborn and fiery, always insisting he would build something bigger than Dad's oven one day. Life was not easy, but it was beautiful. On Sundays, after church, we'd all squeeze around the old wooden dining table Thomas built himself. I'd cook roast chicken, mashed potatoes, corn on the cob, our little Texan feast. The boys would fight over the last biscuit, and I'd sit back, heart full, knowing this chaos was exactly what happiness was supposed to look like. Even when tragedy struck, when cancer took Thomas from me far too soon, I refused to let our world crumble. I picked myself up, sold the bakery, and worked long hours at a real estate office while the boys went to college. They studied hard, fought their way into boardrooms that once would have slammed the door in their faces. And one by one, they rose. Daniel became a real estate tycoon. Robert built a logistics empire, and James launched a tech company that made national headlines. To see your children succeed beyond your wildest dreams, it's a kind of reward that money can't buy. And through it all, we never lost the closeness. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, they came back home, filling the house with laughter, carrying stories of deals closed, and slipping their arms around me, reminding me that I was still their mother before anything else. So when Emily, my youngest, announced she was getting married, it felt like life had come full circle. My daughter, the baby of the family, walking down the aisle in white. I spent months planning every detail, pouring myself into it the way I once poured flour and sugar. This wedding was not just her moment, it was ours. A celebration of survival, of love, of everything Thomas and I had built. I wanted to look my best that day, not for vanity, but because I wanted my children to see me radiant, strong, still standing after all these years. That was the dream. But dreams, as I would soon learn, can be torn apart in seconds, and the first cracks began to show long before the wedding even started. When Emily's fiancé slipped that engagement ring onto her finger, I cried harder than she did. Not because I was sad, but because I could see her father's smile in that moment, even though he's been gone for over 20 years. My little girl, the baby who used to curl up in my lap and beg me to read fairy tales twice over, was finally getting her own happily ever after. From that day forward, I threw myself into planning the wedding as though it were my personal mission. I visited every bridal boutique in Dallas, helped Emily choose her gown, and stood beside her during the fittings. I remember holding her veil in my hands, thinking about the first time I braided her hair before school, marveling at how time had flown. My children insisted I deserved something special too. "Mom, you're not just a guest at this wedding," Daniel told me. "You're the matriarch. You need to look the part." So together we chose the dress. The navy gown with the silver embroidery fitted perfectly for my figure. For weeks, it hung in my closet, waiting for its moment, and every time I passed it, I felt a little spark of pride. That pride extended beyond appearances. The house was buzzing with excitement. My sons teased Emily about her forever boyfriend, while she chased them out of the kitchen, laughing. On the weekends, Robert grilled steaks in the backyard, and James brought over wine. Anna, my eldest daughter-in-law, helped me finalize the seating chart. We were one big team, united in love and anticipation. But not everyone shared that joy. Linda, my husband's cousin, suddenly reappeared in my life with unusual eagerness. She called me often, asking about the preparations. "Do you need help with the flowers? Should I talk to the caterer?" At first, I thought she was trying to be kind. After all, family should stand together during milestones. And though Linda had always been complicated, I wanted to believe people could change. She came with me to the florist one afternoon, complimenting every choice I made. "Margaret, you have such exquisite taste," she gushed, her smile wide, her tones syrupy. She even helped me carry boxes of decorations to the car, laughing about how weddings always made her sentimental. For a brief moment, I let myself trust her. I told myself, maybe all those years of tension were just misunderstandings. Maybe she's really here to celebrate Emily. Looking back, I realize how naive that was, because beneath every compliment, there was an undertone I ignored. When she saw the guest list, her eyes narrowed. When she watched my sons fuss over me, her lips tightened, and when she touched the fabric of my gown during a fitting, her fingers lingered just a little too long. I brushed it all aside. I wanted peace, not suspicion. Emily's happiness mattered more than old grudges. I even told Anna one evening, maybe Linda's finally softening with age. Let's give her a chance. Anna hesitated but nodded. If only I had listened to that hesitation. Because Linda wasn't softening. She was sharpening her blade. And I was walking straight into her trap. The morning of the wedding should have been nothing but joy. The sun was bright over Dallas, the air crisp for late spring, and every detail was falling into place like a scene from a movie. Emily was glowing, her veil shimmering in the light, and the ballroom was dressed in ivory roses and flickering candles. But amid all the beauty, Linda's presence loomed like a storm cloud. She arrived earlier than most guests, strutting into the reception hall in a glittering red gown that clashed deliberately with the wedding colors. It wasn't someone else had honored Emily's request for soft pastels, but Linda wanted the spotlight, and the way she scanned the room, chin high, told me she knew she had it. At first, I tried to ignore her. I kept reminding myself, this is Emily's day, nothing else matters. But ignoring Linda has never been easy. She has a way of making herself heard, even when she doesn't raise her voice. During cocktail hour, I caught her rolling her eyes at the string quartet. "A bit pretentious, don't you think?" she said to the couple seated beside her. "Live music for a wedding reception. What a waste of money." Later, when the servers brought out the first course, she waved her fork dramatically. "Chicken again? At a country club?" I expected something more refined. Her laughter was sharp, the kind that carries across a room. Each jab landed harder than I wanted to admit, not because her words held truth, but because of the timing. She wasn't just criticizing the details, I knew she was criticizing me. I had chosen the music, the menu, the arrangements. Every insult was a dagger, dressed in sarcasm. I tried to smile through it, to keep my head high. But Anna noticed. She always notices. At one point, she leaned over and whispered, "Don't let her get to you, Mom. Everyone sees through it." Her hand squeezed mine under the table, grounding me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda's bitterness was escalating. Her eyes lingered on my sons too long, especially when they stood together near the bar. 3 men in tailored suits, exuding power, each a reflection of their father's legacy. Pride swelled in me when I looked at them, but when I caught Linda watching, her expression was different. It wasn't admiration, it was resentment, raw and unfiltered. And then came the moment that sealed my unease. While Emily was taking photos with her bridesmaids, Linda slipped up beside me. Her smile was sweet for the camera, but her whisper burned my ear. "Funny how everything always works out for you, isn't it? Almost too perfectly." I froze. There it was, the poison behind the mask. I forced a laugh, pretending I hadn't heard the venom in her words. But inside, something shifted. For the first time that day, I felt the ground beneath me tremble. I told myself to stay calm, to focus on Emily, to brush it off. But my gut was screaming a warning. This wasn't the end of Linda's bitterness. It was only the beginning. And what she was about to do next, none of us were prepared for. The reception hall buzzed with joy. Glasses clinked, laughter echoed off the high ceilings, and the newlyweds glowed under the warm chandelier light. For a moment, I allowed myself to relax. Maybe Linda's barbs had been nothing more than her usual bitterness. Maybe she would stay contained. But I should have known better. It began innocently enough. During the toasts, when friends and family rose to speak, Linda suddenly stood, uninvited. Her heels clicked against the parquet floor as she marched to the microphone. Emily's smile faltered, but ever the gracious bride, she gestured for Linda to go ahead. "My dear Emily," Linda began, her tone sticky sweet. "What a beautiful day. What a perfect wedding. Almost too perfect, wouldn't you say?" The room chuckled politely, but my stomach dropped. Linda's eyes darted to me before she continued. "And none of this would be possible without your mother, Margaret. She's always had a way of making everything about her sparkle." She paused, letting her words linger, her smile tight, even when others are left in the shadows. I gripped the edge of my chair. The implication was sharp, obvious to anyone who knew the history between us. My son stiffened across the table. Emily's hand clutched her husband's arm. The toast stumbled on with more veiled jabs until finally, mercifully, Linda handed the microphone back. Guests applauded awkwardly, shifting in their seats. I forced a smile, swallowing the lump in my throat. I wouldn't let her ruin this day. But she wasn't finished. Later, during the cake cutting, I stood nearby, ready to guide Emily's long train away from the frosting. It was a tender, simple moment. Cameras flashed, the crowd cheered as the bride and groom lifted the knife together. That's when Linda sidled up beside me. She leaned in, her perfume thick, her voice low but sharp enough to pierce my heart. "You don't deserve this happiness," she whispered. And before I could move, before I could even process the cruelty in her words, her hand shot out. With one violent tug, she ripped my gown straight down the side. The sound, fabric tearing, was so loud it silenced the room. Gasps erupted. Someone dropped their glass. A murmur spread like wildfire. What just happened? I froze, heat flooding my face, shame crashing over me like a tidal wave. My hand instinctively tried to cover the tear, but it was useless. My navy gown, the one I had cherished, was ruined, shredded in front of 200 witnesses. Linda feigned horror, clutching her chest. "Oh my goodness, I tripped. Margaret, I'm so sorry." Her performance was flawless, her voice dripping with false concern. But I had felt it, the deliberate grip, the yank, the satisfaction in her eyes. Around us, guests whispered, some pitying, some skeptical. A few even smirked, entertained by the spectacle. My daughter's wedding, the day I had dreamed of for years, had become a stage for my humiliation. But I didn't scream. I didn't lash out. I stood tall, trembling but silent, refusing to give Linda the satisfaction of watching me break. What Linda didn't realize, though, was that she had crossed a line she could never step back from. And my sons had seen everything. As I stood there, clutching the torn edges of my gown, humiliation burning my skin, my mind wasn't just in that ballroom. It began racing backward, through years, through decades, replaying every interaction I had ever had with Linda. And suddenly, the pattern became painfully clear. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't even just a cruel moment of jealousy. This was the culmination of years of bitterness, manipulation, and entitlement. I remembered the first time Linda came to me for help, shortly after Thomas passed away. She'd shown up at my door in tears, claiming her husband had lost his job. I didn't hesitate. I wrote her a check for $2,000, money I barely had, because family, to me, was sacred. She hugged me, called me her lifesaver. But when she left, she didn't call again until she needed more. There were other times, too. When her son dropped out of college, she begged me to convince Daniel to find him a job at his firm. Just an internship, Margaret, just to get him started. Daniel obliged out of respect for me, but the boy never showed up on time, and within weeks, he was fired. Linda blamed my son for being too demanding. Then there was the vacation home. She had asked to borrow it for a weekend getaway. That weekend turned into 2 months, the furniture damaged, the bills unpaid. When I finally confronted her, she laughed it off. "Relax, Margaret, you've got so much. Sharing won't kill you." Each memory hit me like a slap across the face. All those years I had opened my home, my wallet, my heart, thinking I was keeping the family bond alive. In reality, I had been nothing more than a stepping stone for her envy. And now, here she was, exposing me, tearing my dignity apart in front of everyone I loved. It wasn't about the dress. It wasn't even about Emily's wedding. It was about Linda's twisted need to prove that I didn't deserve the life I had built, the respect I had earned, the children who adored me. I could almost hear Thomas's voice in my head, gentle but firm. "You've given her too much power." He'd warned me years ago, back when Linda's bitterness first showed. I brushed it aside, believing kindness could melt resentment. But standing in that ballroom, shredded gown clinging to me, I realized kindness had only fed her cruelty. And yet, in that moment of clarity, I didn't collapse. I didn't break. I stood taller. Because as painful as it was, I finally saw Linda for who she truly was. Not a family member, not even a rival. Just a bitter woman who thrived on exploiting others until there was nothing left to take. She thought she had won. She thought she had humiliated me beyond repair. But what she didn't understand was that exposing herself like this, so publicly, so viciously, was the beginning of her downfall. Because my sons weren't little boys anymore. They weren't powerless to her games. They were men, powerful men, and they had just watched her cross a line she could never uncross. And from that moment on, I knew Linda's reign of cruelty was about to end. After Linda's attack, the ballroom didn't return to normal. The music played, the waitstaff moved swiftly with trays of champagne, but the air had shifted. I could feel it in the way people's voices dropped to hushed whispers whenever I passed. I could feel it in the stares. Some sympathetic, some judgmental, and some, I swear, entertained. That's the cruelty of public humiliation. It doesn't end with the act itself. It echoes in every corner, multiplying through gossip, feeding on silence. I caught fragments of conversations as I made my way to the ladies' room to compose myself. "Did you see the way her dress ripped, almost like it wasn't an accident?" "Well, you know, Margaret, she's always been a little showy. 3 rich sons, a daughter marrying into money. Maybe Linda just snapped. Can you blame her?" Each word sliced into me. Not only had Linda torn my dress, she had planted seeds of doubt in the minds of everyone watching. Suddenly, I was the villain in their whispers. The woman who had too much, who flaunted it, who somehow invited envy. In the mirror of the restroom, I studied myself. My reflection was a mixture of strength and fragility. My lipstick was smudged, my gown ruined, my eyes wet but burning with resolve. I pressed my palms to the counter and whispered to myself, "Don't cry. Not here. Not now." I thought about Emily, my sweet daughter, radiant in her gown, glowing beside her new husband. This was her day. The last thing I wanted was for her to remember her wedding as the day her mother fell apart. So I swallowed the tears and straightened my shoulders. I would not give Linda another ounce of satisfaction. But silence, I realized, came at a cost. As I re-entered the reception, I felt the shift. People weren't looking at Linda with disgust. They were looking at me with pity. And pity can be more cutting than cruelty. At our table, Anna leaned closer. Her voice was low, urgent. "Mom, you can't just let her get away with this. Everyone saw what she did." I shook my head, forcing a smile. "Not tonight. This is Emily's night." Anna's eyes filled with frustration, but she said nothing more. My sons, however, were not so easily pacified. I could feel their eyes on me, burning with anger, silently demanding justice. And yet, I held my silence, because I knew something Linda didn't. I knew that sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's a weapon. It's patience. It's the calm before a storm. But as the evening wore on, the weight of that silence pressed harder against my chest. The rumors spread, twisting into harsher versions with every retelling. I was painted as vain, as arrogant, as the woman who deserved to be put in her place. It hurt. God, it hurt. But deep inside, something else was building alongside the pain. A fire. A steady, simmering fire that would not be extinguished by whispers or stares. Linda thought she had broken me, but what she had really done was awaken the part of me that would no longer be her victim. And she had no idea that my silence was already plotting her undoing. I may have chosen silence, but my sons did not. From across the ballroom, I saw them exchange glances, subtle, sharp, unspoken. Years of boardrooms and negotiations had made them men of action, men who knew when to speak and when to move in shadows. And tonight, they moved in silence. Daniel, my eldest, excused himself from the table, pulling out his phone. He had connections in Dallas media, reporters who owed him favors, editors who trusted his word. I knew exactly what he was doing, controlling the narrative before it spun out of hand. If whispers painted me as vain, Daniel would make sure the truth had its stage. Robert, always the tactician, leaned back casually in his chair, eyes scanning the room. He caught the attention of the event manager, a tall man in a crisp black suit. With a discreet nod, Robert gestured toward the security team posted at the exits. Within minutes, the manager was at his side. No scene, no fuss, just quiet instructions exchanged. Robert wasn't going to let Linda slip away before her performance could be exposed for what it was. And then there was James, my youngest. His world was technology, innovation, data. While guests laughed nervously and sipped champagne, James was already connecting with the venue's AV team. The ballroom had security cameras, and James knew how to access footage faster than anyone else. His jaw was tight, his voice low, but his determination was unmistakable. He was going to find the proof. Meanwhile, Anna, the daughter-in-law who had become like a daughter to me, played her part flawlessly. She stayed close, offering me soft smiles and small talk, all while her phone recorded every detail. When Linda laughed too loudly, when she basked in the attention of those who pitied me, Anna's camera caught it. Every smirk, every calculated glance. It was all evidence. And Linda? She had no idea. She floated around the room like a queen, sipping champagne, feigning sympathy. Guests gathered around her, some nodding, some whispering. She thought she had turned the crowd in her favor. She thought she had crushed me. What she didn't see were the quiet movements happening just beyond her awareness, the pieces shifting into place. My sons weren't shouting, they weren't causing a scene. They were building something far more devastating than an outburst. They were building inevitability. I stayed seated, my torn gown hidden beneath the tablecloth, my face calm. Inside, though, my heart swelled, not with pain this time, but with pride. My children weren't just protecting me. They were showing me that the strength I had poured into them all these years was alive and burning. The storm was gathering, invisible to most, undeniable to me. Linda thought silence meant defeat, but silence, in the right hands, becomes strategy. And that night, my sons were strategists. Linda's moment of triumph was already slipping through her fingers, though she didn't know it yet. Because every smirk she flashed, every lie she spun, every sip of champagne she took was another step closer to the downfall she never saw coming. And when the truth finally surfaced, it wouldn't just expose her, it would destroy her. The night was reaching its peak. The band had just begun playing a soft tune for the first slow dances. Couples swayed under the chandeliers, laughter filling the room once more, as if the earlier scandal had already been buried beneath champagne and small talk. But my children hadn't forgotten. Neither had I. I watched from my seat as Anna quietly slipped away toward the stage. She moved with the grace of someone blending into the celebration, her gown flowing, her smile soft. Nobody suspected what she was about to do. Not even Linda, who was standing near the dessert table, soaking in the attention of guests who still clung to her side like moths to a flame. Moments later, the music stopped. Anna tapped the microphone, her voice carrying gently across the room. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with the dancing, the Hayes family would love to share a short video, a tribute to Emily and her new husband, just a few memories to celebrate this special day. Guests clapped, delighted. The lights dimmed slightly, and all eyes turned toward the giant screen at the far end of the ballroom. I felt my breath catch. My sons exchanged glances, subtle nods of confirmation. This was it. The video began like any other wedding montage. Photos of Emily as a child, her first day of school, Christmas mornings, vacations by the lake. The crowd cooed and laughed, charmed by the sweet nostalgia. I could see tears glistening in a few eyes. But then, midway through the slideshow, the footage shifted. Grainy but clear, from one of the security cameras positioned in the ballroom, appeared the moment Linda tore my gown. The angle was perfect, capturing her hand clutching the fabric, her deliberate tug, the malicious satisfaction flickering across her face. And though the room had been loud at the time, the microphone clipped to the DJ booth had caught her whisper. "You don't deserve this happiness." The words rang out through the speakers, amplified and undeniable. A collective gasp rippled across the crowd. People leaned forward, hands covering their mouths. The polite fiction Linda had spun, that she had tripped, that it had been an accident, was obliterated in an instant. And there she stood, frozen in the harsh glow of truth. Her smile vanished, her glass of champagne trembling in her hand. Eyes that once looked at her with sympathy, now narrowed in disgust. Whispers surged again, but this time they weren't about me. They caught her on camera? She planned it? My God, how cruel. I sat perfectly still, my heart steady. For the first time that night, I felt the balance shift. I wasn't the victim anymore. The room knew the truth. And Linda knew it too. Anna stepped back from the microphone, her smile calm, her voice steady. Family should lift each other up. Tonight, let's celebrate love, not envy. She didn't need to say more. The footage had spoken louder than words ever could. Linda's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, she was speechless. And yet, what my sons were about to do next would cut even deeper than this revelation. The silence after the video ended was louder than any applause could have been. Every eye in the ballroom turned, not toward me anymore, but toward Linda. Her face was pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. For decades she had been the one whispering, the one spinning stories in the shadows. But now, stripped bare, under the light of truth, she had nothing left to hide behind. And that's when Daniel rose from his seat. My eldest son, tall and commanding in his charcoal suit, walked toward the stage with the same quiet authority I'd seen him use in boardrooms filled with billionaires. His voice was steady, deep, and carried to every corner of the hall. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, pausing deliberately before looking at Linda. "That's not just my mother standing there in that torn gown. That's the woman who built everything you see before you. She raised 4 children alone after losing her husband. She worked until her hands blistered, until her back gave out, so that we could have a chance at life. And you thought humiliating her would diminish her?" He shook his head, his eyes narrowing. "No, all you've done tonight is reveal yourself." The crowd erupted in murmurs, heads nodding, eyes shifting away from Linda with disdain. Robert was next. My middle son stood, smooth and precise as always, the strategist. He gestured toward the security staff who had been waiting at the edges of the room. "This is a private event. You were invited as family. But after what you've done, you're no longer welcome here." His voice carried no anger, just cold certainty. "Security, escort her out." Gasps followed his words. Linda stumbled backward, clutching her purse, shaking her head. "You can't do this. I'm family," she protested, but the conviction in her voice was gone. And then James, my fiery youngest, delivered the final blow. He stepped forward, holding up a slim envelope. "Family doesn't try to destroy each other, Linda. And while you were busy tearing dresses, we were busy preparing legal papers. This is from our attorney. Defamation, public humiliation. You will answer for what you've done, not just here, but in court." The ballroom was electric. The whispers turned into applause. Guests who had once smirked at my torn gown now clapped, their faces lit with admiration for my son's defense. Some even stood, their support undeniable. Linda froze, her bravado shattered. She looked around, hoping for someone to defend her. But no one moved. Her allies had melted away into the crowd, unwilling to stand beside her now that the truth was exposed. She tried one last time, her voice trembling. "Margaret, tell them I didn't mean it." For the first time that night I stood. My voice was calm, my face serene. "Linda," I said softly, "for years I gave you kindness, even when you didn't deserve it. Tonight you tore more than a dress. You tore your last chance to be part of this family." The room fell silent again, just long enough for my words to settle like stone. And then the applause rose once more, louder, fuller, drowning out Linda's desperate protests as security led her away. She had tried to break me with humiliation. Instead, she was the one broken by truth. And in that moment, justice had never tasted so sweet. The ballroom felt different after Linda was gone. The air, once thick with tension and whispers, seemed to clear. It was as if the entire room had exhaled, releasing the poison she had carried in with her. The music started again, softly at first, then stronger, filling the silence she had left behind. I remained standing for a moment, my torn gown still visible to everyone. But this time, it wasn't a symbol of shame. It was a badge of survival. Guests weren't looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking with respect. Emily was the first to rush to my side. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she wrapped her arms around me, careful not to snag the ruined fabric. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry this happened. I should have." I held her face in my hands before she could finish. "No, sweetheart. None of this is on you. Tonight is still your night, and nothing, not even a torn dress, can take away the joy of watching you start your new life." Her groom nodded, his arm slipping protectively around her waist. "Mrs. Hayes, you are the strongest woman I've ever met. It's an honor to be part of this family." His words steadied me, more than he could know. My sons gathered close then, surrounding me like a shield. Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. "Mom, you don't need to worry about Linda anymore. We'll handle everything." Robert added, "You taught us to fight with dignity. Tonight we just proved that to her and to everyone else." And James, fiery as ever, leaned in and whispered, "You raised us well, Mom. She underestimated all of us." Pride swelled in my chest so fiercely it almost hurt. In that moment, I realized something vital. Linda hadn't just failed to destroy me. She had unintentionally showcased the very thing she despised most, the unity of my family. The guests began approaching, one by one. Old friends, colleagues of my son's, even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. They shook my hand, offered warm embraces, and said words I would never forget. "You handled that with grace. Your family is remarkable. You showed us all what real strength looks like." Each word was a salve against the wounds Linda had tried to inflict. Even the staff at the venue moved quickly to help. Within minutes, one of the attendants brought me a tailored black shawl from the club's boutique. Draped over my shoulders, it transformed the ruined gown into something elegant again. I smiled, realizing that dignity doesn't come from what you wear. It comes from how you carry yourself. The rest of the evening unfolded beautifully. Emily and her husband danced their first dance, the crowd cheering, the moment unmarred by earlier ugliness. Laughter filled the room once more, genuine and untainted. And me? I sat back and watched, my heart full. Linda's cruelty had not destroyed us, it had only reminded me of what truly mattered. Family, resilience, quiet strength. She had tried to make me the spectacle of the night. Instead, my family's love had made me the anchor. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly untouchable. When I finally laid my head on the pillow that night, after the last guest had left and the last candle had been blown out, I didn't think about my ruined dress. I didn't even think about Linda being escorted out, her protests drowned by applause. What I thought about, what stayed with me, was my children's faces. The way Daniel spoke with unwavering conviction. The way Robert calmly orchestrated control of the room. The way James, bold and fiery, put the law on our side without hesitation. And Anna, my sweet daughter-in-law, stepping into the light to reveal the truth with grace. That was my victory, not Linda's downfall. Mine. Because in that ballroom, on the night my daughter married the love of her life, I saw proof that everything Thomas and I had sacrificed for, everything we had built together, had endured. It was alive in our children, stronger than envy, louder than whispers, untouchable. I've learned something important through this ordeal, and it's a truth I want to share with anyone who has ever felt humiliated, betrayed, or broken. Silence is not weakness. For years, I mistook kindness for surrender. I thought turning the other cheek meant giving people like Linda permission to keep hurting me. But that night taught me the difference. Silence is not surrender. It's strategy. It's choosing when to hold your ground and when to let truth do the speaking for you. Linda tore my dress, but she could never tear the fabric of my dignity. Dignity isn't stitched into clothing. It isn't written on invitations or measured in the size of your home. Dignity is carried in the way you rise after someone tries to cut you down. It's in the way you refuse to let bitterness define you, even when bitterness stands inches away, clawing at your skin. And perhaps the sweetest lesson of all is this. Envy always devours itself. People like Linda will spend their lives trying to poison others, but in the end, the poison always burns them first. I walked away from that night with a torn gown, yes, but also with a heart fuller than it had ever been, with a family bound tighter than ever, and with a truth etched so deep inside me that I will never forget it. So if you're listening to my story right now, I want you to remember this. When life humiliates you, when betrayal claws at your skin, don't rush to shout, don't rush to strike back. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand tall in silence and let time, truth, and love deliver the justice you deserve. And if you've ever been where I was, standing torn but unbroken, then you know what I mean. If you're still here with me now, thank you for listening. Thank you for giving my story your time, your heart, your presence. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like these aren't just mine. They belong to every woman who has ever been betrayed, every mother who has ever fought in silence, and every soul who knows that dignity is the greatest revenge.